It's not easy living on a dying planet, but it is easy to feel overwhelmed when it comes to making changes and taking action to try and save it. Where do you start? Is it even worth it? Can you really make a difference? Welcome to the Tea on Sustainable Living podcast, where we attempt to answer these questions by spilling the tea on living sustainably in a world that's going to shit. I'm Brandy.
And I'm Hannah. And for years we've been navigating the big, messy grey area of caring about our planet. It hasn't always been smooth sailing, but we're not giving up yet. So, brew yourself a cup of tea, get comfy, and let's try and navigate that grey area together.
Hello, Give-A-Shitters. This is Hannah.
And this is Brandy, and you're listening to episode number 24 of the Tea on Sustainable Living podcast.
Woo!
I was waiting for it. I was like, is she going to do it?
I need to think of something else. I feel obliged, but also really awkward.
Oh, yeah.
It's nearly as bad as your tea later.
How dare you? I think I was meant to find a little sound clip or something.
We could have a little the fake clapping.
Oh, okay. Would that be funny or a bit
or just weird? Yeah,
weird.
Probably.
Yeah,
it was like a laugh track on comedy shows.
Yeah, I feel if we do something like that, we have to go all in. That needs to be obvious that we're trying to be cheesy or whatever.
Yeah.
Anyways, what are we talking about today, Hannah?
We're talking about emotions.
Specifically shame.
Yeah, shame, anger, frustration, guilt, all the big ones.
Mixed bag of emotions today.
Yeah, I was this is one has been on my mind for a while because I feel I just get even recording these episodes sometimes I can hear myself and I'm just I don't think this is good enough. There's a part of me that's is this enough? Where we tend down the kind of a bit of a more moderate approach and encouragement and everything that you do is a positive step, which there's a part of me that absolutely believes that. And I also think that's a much more productive way forward. But there's a part of me that's just no, what are you doing? The planet is dying. We're fucked. How can we sit here and be well, which I will totally do, but I'm I want to go on holiday, so I'm gonna get a plane, woo, and then I'm this isn't enough, and I wanted to talk about that side of things.
Yeah, and I've been hesitant to kind of have this chat because I think it brings up guilt. And we'll touch more on this in the episode, but for me, there's definitely a difference between kind of experiencing shame around something shopping at Primark, for example, myself, whether that comes from me or whether that comes from someone else shaming me and I react differently to those, which we can dive into more. But what I thought was interesting, what you said is our kind of moderate approach is that it is the more productive approach. But upon reading your notes on this outline and doing a bit of research, I think there's definitely some more room for shame to drive individual action without it going too far and preventing and us just feeling overwhelmed and preventing us from doing anything well, we're fucked, so what's the point? Because I think it's a slippery slope.
It is, and I definitely get there sometimes. I'm well, things clearly aren't getting better, which isn't necessarily clear, but that's where emotionally I'll get to things aren't getting better. I look at, why are you still, to me and to other people, why are you still shopping there? Why are you still doing this? We know it's not the right choice, or do we know it's not the right choice? But emotionally, again, that's where I get to. Mm-hmm. And then it's yeah, well, fuck it. Just gonna watch the world explode and drink some cocktails and go on 10 holidays a year because why the fuck not? I mean, it's all going to end anyway.
That sounds exhausting.
It is exhausting. I mean, that's obviously not where I am all or even most of the time, but it's definitely there for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think one of the things that prompted this episode idea, and we were just saying before we hit record, we couldn't remember who sent it to who. Mm-hmm. Who? I never know when to use that. Anyway, it was the Aja Barber Instagram post about like shame and specifically around Shein, but I think it applies.
Yeah.
What one of the slides of that post was, well, I'll read a couple. She was like, want to know why I stopped buying fast fashion? Because I felt ashamed of what I had unwittingly done to the planet and other people. Shame has been very effective for me. And then I transfer that shame into action. And here I am talking to you. And then this example, imagine a Seymour garment worker is like, hey, can you tell people not to buy from blank? They're withholding my wages and our wages, and I haven't had a good night's sleep in weeks. And then Twitter ran out, okay, but I'm not going to shame people on your behalf for their purchases. And that's where I think it gets like a bit sticky, is like keeping the shame like to ourselves, or like then shaming other people, or like what is that like block there? Because if you're right, we are fucked. And it's just like in that example, that like example she gave very much humanizes it, which I think is another issue.
Yeah. I mean, I really struggle with this one, I think, because, and maybe with my like more judgy side, because for me, the decision not to shop at places, or like specifically Shein.
No idea.
It feels quite easy. I'm not like a big clothes person. My fast fashion purchases tend to be like in person, like in the moment. I'm like, I just need this thing. And otherwise I'm quite good at, so like, you know, like an online shop. For me, that's something easy because clothes aren't like a really important thing in my life. So I find it easier to be more judgmental because it's something that's feels quite straightforward to me. And then I look at and I'm like, I just don't get it. I'm like, you know, concrete example, Shein, you know, it has, the model produces so much waste. Clearly, the workers aren't being treated properly. And yet this €4 t-shirt is worth more to you than everything else.
Than the person's livelihood who made it.
And I find that that really makes me angry. But I'm also self-aware enough to know that that's an easy one for me to get angry at other people for, because it's something that's straightforward for me. And also that me being like, to what point in me kind of being so morally black and white on this issue, although I think it probably is a moral black and white, that we should have access to, you know, that we should have access to safe, well-paid work.
Yeah.
I don't know that that's productive for me to put that on other people. And it's also hypocritical because there's other things that I would really struggle with. And as we've talked about in lots of episodes, neither of us are perfect. That's kind of where this whole thing came from.
Yeah, and the fear of like being called out, like you said, the hypocrisy element of it. I think that prevents a lot of, I don't know, action or conversations. Because take the minimalist, for example, they were like, we're aware, like the minimalist domain, like that was available, so they bought it. But like the second they call themselves that, it's like people put you in a box and call you out when you put like a toenail out of line. Like when I first went vegan, and that was just the easiest term that I could grasp. But if I ate a Hershey's bar that had milk in it, like I got called out for that, which isn't helpful. So yeah, I think there's definitely more of a need for like messy action. But it's hard. It's scary to like kind of put yourself out there and say shopping at places like Primark or buying things from Shein is bad when you have items from there in your closet. So then but yeah, I think, the clothing, I think we're using that example because I think it's just an easier kind of concrete.
Yeah, it's an easier one
to like chat about this topic. But yeah, I feel like, well, in that case, I feel like it is easier. Like if it's something that like bothers you, you can, you know.
But it is that thing of like where I'm happy to put that limit on other people or put that shame or guilt. Oh, not happy to, but it's something that feels more comfortable to me because for me it's so obvious, and it is that thing that for me it's easy because it's not a big issue. And yet I know, for example, one thing that's hard for me would be the amount of flights I go on every year.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, just by the fact of living abroad, that's at least for me, like living UK to the Madrid, probably go home 4 or 5 times a year. That's 10 flights. And then, you know, I do want to go on holiday, and some of those will be long haul flights. Some of it might be a holiday in Spain, but others of it will be, you know, that's like 12 flights like that. And if I think of my friend groups who live in the UK, that is obscene in comparison. They might take like one foreign holiday a year, and so that would be 2 flights.
Mm-hmm.
But because that's something that's not easy for me, and I'm like, I've made the choice to live abroad and I want to still have access to the things I want to access. Do we want to reduce our life to that? Like to, okay, you should only, you know, do 1 trip a year, blah, blah, blah. I don't want to accept the consequences of reducing the amount of times I visit home. I don't want to accept. So I just ignore them.
Mm.
And I'm like, well, is that okay? I mean,
it's no. But I don't know, my initial thought is like only you can answer that. But then, yeah, part of this chat is like kind of putting shame on other people, not us, like just me and you in this conversation, but like other people, other companies,
right.
kind of.
And it's like only you can decide, but there is some factual evidence behind these decisions.
There's a lot of factual evidence. There was
right. You know, it's like, okay, you're choosing to take 12 flights. That basically, I'm making this up right now, but I can check. But I've looked before, and like that wipes out the fact that you're like vegetarian, like that, right?
Yeah, and you shared an article in the outline, which we'll definitely link because it's worth a read. And one of the articles it mentions, I'll link that as well, how the world's richest people are driving global warming. And I didn't copy the stat into the outline, but it was something about, what was it, that like 4/5 of the world's population has never been on a plane, and like the percentage of people who do fly, the proportion of like emissions that like contributes to, and it's just like a crazy small percentage of people who fly creates like an insane amount.
Yeah. And there was this thing about the top. One of the things that really struck me was about in that article, that what you just said, the top 10% drive most of the emissions. And I think you've copied it here. The top 10% of polluters, about 770 million people, roughly the population of Europe, are the climate equivalent of the world's wealthiest decile, who earn more than $38,000 a year, according to Oxfam. So that's if you're earning over $38,000 a year, you are factually within the top 10% of the world's population in terms of wealth.
Yeah, and considered wealthy. Something like that. Yeah.
And considered wealthy.
Yeah. I think Lena Norms did a video about like, she's like, something along the lines of like, I don't feel wealthy, but then when she looked at like all the factors of her life, she's like, oh no, like I am. Which we'll link that. But yeah, the article was great as far as statistics and how it looked at not just so far a lot of the like climate conversations, and as far as like emissions and responsibility and who's contributed the most has been mostly about like countries. But then this research from was it World Inequality Lab found that it's wealth across nations, like individual wealth, regardless of like the country, you contribute the most. Yeah, something I thought of when thinking about this topic was that how people love hearing good things about their bad habits, but then the opposite is true. People like really don't like hearing bad things about their bad habits because it puts a spotlight on them and it makes them like feel bad and judged, and nobody likes that. And that's what prevents like people from changing. So like how do you make room for more shame, whether it's I mean, do you start in your own life? Yeah. With your own actions? Do you figure out how to, I'm hesitant to say like shame other people, but maybe like that hesitation is what we need to like get over, because
Mm-hmm.
maybe we just need to share more like kind of humanizing things like in that Aja Barber post, so that people can make that connection to like the people who are suffering behind our, you know, wealthy and convenient choices, purchases, etc.
And it's like it's
a jumble of thoughts right there.
Yeah. No, and just it's a lot of interesting points, and it's like how do you find the sweet spot, right? To feel bad enough about something to make a change, but not so bad that you either think, well, fuck it, I'm just a shit person, and why do I care? You know, I think there's maybe like a productive point in all of that emotional angst. Like what we talk about, like, you know, where do you find the productive point in the sort of before you end up in the, you know, grey spiral of doom? Right?
I thought it was quagmire of doom.
Oh, I'm sorry. Quagmire of doom, it's true. But it's like, I
think you have to start with one area. Like Aja Barber, she talks a lot about like ethical fashion. She wrote a book, Consumed, which is really good. I recommend it. Like I think you kind of have to find your thing, which we know obviously we touched on in our climate Venn diagram, finding your climate action, whatever it was called. Because you can't do all the things. One person, like you do have a bigger impact than you think. Talk about a ripple effect, and we can come back and talk to, there's a part of that article that I really liked and want to touch on, but you're not going to do all the things starting tomorrow. So I don't know, there are different approaches. Like I've heard people say, like, what kind of makes you like the angriest? Like what angers you the most? Is it people buying cheap fast fashion? Is it flights? Is it food? Because those are some of the biggest kind of culprits. And then I think you have to, whatever your thing is, you need to kind of accept that, okay, I need to make some changes. You don't need to be perfect, because what's the quote, like, don't let perfect be the enemy of the good, or whatever. Like, don't let that prevent you, like, you know, becoming Greta Thunberg and never flying again and taking a boat anytime you want to see your family. Like,
I guess it's that. For me, I was trying to think of a way, when I was thinking about this episode and trying to think of a way to have a conversation that was productive. One of the things that came to me was about accountability and like finding, you know, other people or finding a way to have that accountability, especially when you're having to make decisions or wanting to make decisions that you don't really like on one level. Especially, you know, the big kind of pleasure seeking live life to the fullest side of humanity, like the part that maybe is like denying some of that. You know, how do you, I don't know.
Well, I think there is an it depends element of this. I'm surprised, like with most things. I was thinking about Gretchen Rubin. She has this 4 tendencies quiz and talks about, like, I think her example is like working out. And depending on which type you are, and I forget all 4 types, but one of them is like external accountability. So having like a running buddy or some kind of group class where like other people are counting on you, and that's what drives you to like to do something. That's what holds you accountable. For me, it's more internal. Like I need to know the why behind things. So I think it depends on like what typically like holds you accountable for like doing anything. Is it internal? Is it external? I think one of the other tendencies was like a rebel, which I'm a part of sometimes, by telling myself to do something. Sometimes just that automatically ensures that like I'm not going to do it. How dare you tell myself? I'm not sure of the right pronouns there, but yeah, for most of the time for me, it's like understanding the why behind things, like watching documentaries about fast fashion. What was it called? The True Cost.
Yeah,
so that was
a good one.
Quite eye-opening for me. So yeah, I think it depends on your kind of your personality and when you've like wanted to make changes or create new habits in the past for anything, not necessarily sustainability focus. Like what led to you like seeing that through?
Yeah, that's a good question. No,
Because if it is external stuff, like community is a great way to go. But yeah, for me, it tends to be more like research and like understanding the why behind the thing. Is that helpful?
That is helpful.
It's more of a reflective kind of thing. Like you're not going to have like an immediate, unlikely to have an immediate response to that. But
yeah, no, it's interesting. I'm trying to think. I'm not a very like habit oriented person. I'm like, need to think about it.
And some people aren't. Some people just like, I forget. I think it might be I forget. I'm going to look up what the 4 tendencies are real quick, because I think one of them, or maybe I'm mixing this up with something else, is that you just kind of do what feels like good to you as it comes up. But there's questioner, rebel, obliger, and upholder. Those are the 4.
Well, yeah,
the upholder. One. Okay, the upholder meets outer expectations and inner expectations. So regardless of where that comes from, they like uphold whatever the expectation is, regardless of where it comes from, like they will uphold it. The obliger meets outer expectations. So that's the like kind of running buddy thing, and resists inner expectations. And then the rebel resists both. And then questioner resists outer expectations and meets inner expectations. So that's where I fall mostly.
Okay, that's interesting. I'll have to look it up. I think I would probably end up more in the obliger. But at the same time, if there's something that I've like made a decision on, like I can only think of very like few things where I'm like, no, completely no, normally, rather than yes. I mean, it's normally easier to say no. Maybe, I don't know. Anyway, that was a big statement with very little to back it up. It's normally easier to say no. That's I
think most people would find that it's easier to just say yes when it comes to like when it comes to other people. It's easier to like say yes in the moment.
No, I guess maybe I meant more. No, it's true, but I think I meant more like when you're making a decision about something, it's normally easier to like remove the thing. As in, if it's something where it's like, you know, you can be like, just no, like I don't want to do that thing, rather than being like, yes, I'm going to do.
I think it depends on
like continue to do it.
You like fall under. Sometimes it's easier to just continue because you're not disrupting. Like if other people involved, you're not disrupting. Like I don't know, status quo or like other people around you. And yeah, I mean, I think with any of these types of quizzes, like you'll tend. That's why it's called a tendency. You'll tend to be in this category, but then you can drift to one of the others. So like I'm a questioner primarily, but then I tend to drift towards rebel.
Okay. Interesting. So
that's the one I think I was trying to refer to of like no expectations can be set. You just kind of do things as you feel the need to. So I'm not really sure how that would work in terms of making more like climate friendly habits and bringing in shame, because I feel like with that, comes like some sort of new like expectation or different expectation, like whether it's flying less or buying more fair trade or secondhand clothing items, or picking the veggie option. It's also in that article that touched on diets and how that has changed and affected across the world, not just in like the US. Or there was one stat that I thought was funny. Well, not funny, it's kind of scary thing about it. As people get richer, diets tend to diversify and meat consumption rises. We'd need a second Earth if everyone had the diet of an Australian or a Brit. Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty factual.
Yeah. And I think that diet is, that has been, an easier one for me to feel. I don't know if anger is the right word, but like that was an easy like change for me to make, because I saw like the why behind it and watching documentaries and doing research about like, I mean, it started with, I just don't like the idea of eating animals, but it's evolved over time.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's one where, I'm sorry, carry on.
No, I was just gonna say I've gotten away from, like, I try not to bring it up, or like people are eating meat, they'll apologize to me and say, no, like it's fine, like you do you. And then I have found that over time, this is mostly true when I work like in an office, and people see in the break room what I'm eating and will ask me questions about it. And And that curiosity, I think, has led to more productive conversations than me like pointing to someone's, hamburger and saying, do you know how much water is involved in making that? So.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. I agree. I think the thing is, one of the hard things right now in terms of climate change and kind of around this topic is that I think, at least in Europe, I don't know worldwide, but I would assume it's probably true. Like most people like know there's an issue, and most people have already heard like the big solutions, right?
Mm-hmm.
I feel, and that's a part that's frustrating as well, because I can feel myself getting frustrated. We do have access to so much information and most people know. So if you're choosing not to do something, well, there's two ways we could take this. There's the part of me that's like, and it's like, if you're choosing not to do something, why? Like frustrated, like, why are you choosing not to do something? Maybe not in detail, but like, we know there is a problem. It's taught in schools. There's so much information. Politicians talk about it. It's like one of those things that are on the agenda, sustainability issues in a broad way. Like, we know there is an issue. You would have to be living under a rock. Mm-hmm. And so there's a part of me, there's that side that's like, why? And then there's the other part, which is like, maybe it should be more like, like a curious why. Like, why, when we have all of this information, like, what are the sticking points? Why is it still hard for us to make changes that we need? And kind of trying to change the tone of that, like, rather than being like an angry, frustrated, being like curious, because we have this information. And I genuinely maybe not details, but like everyone I would talk to, I feel like most people I come across in my everyday life, I have some awareness. Mm-hmm. It's quite difficult not to be. So like, what are the sticking points?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. I had a few thoughts. I'll see if I can recall them now. Well, one of them was, I remembered you jotted down, and I found this quote too in that article, was that wealth is a driving factor in carbon and like greenhouse gas emissions in our lifestyles. But then if we lifted the poorest 1 billion out of poverty, that would only increase emissions by 3%. So when we say like we're talking about shame and making changes, like we're referring to the wealthy people who have the means, ability, and privilege to make changes. The guiltiest, honestly, have contributed the most. But yeah, I was thinking about, we're within our 10-minute warning, so we'll try to wrap this up. But I was thinking about my example of like the break room and people coming to me with curiosity. And if you wanted to like maybe spark more, like a very specific example would be if someone's eating the burger, have you tried Beyond Burger yet? Like I hear they're quite good compared to regular meat, or I've tried it myself. Mm-hmm. And that way you're not saying, why are you eating the hamburger? Did you know that it uses this much water, blah, 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 or the people who work in the factory farms live not great lives. Their mental health ain't great. And the animals suffer, like all the things, like instead of pointing that out, like I think, because it goes back to what I said about people not liking, they don't like to hear bad things about their bad habits. They want to hear good things about their bad habits, but I think they also need easy alternatives. Mm-hmm. So if like a Beyond Burger or whatever Burger King here uses is just as good, if not better than the regular, like what's the point of continuing? I hope my point came through in that ramble. I was watching a decluttering video the other day too. It was like putting things away needs to be just as easy as leaving it out. So people need alternatives. And this whole talk of like shame, it's going to work differently on different people.
And also
it's not how I wanted to put it, but
people really act differently. And I mean, like, I'm just reflecting as well, like my whole just like rant then, like, why aren't you doing anything? Like,
it needs to start with you.
Easily turn on me, for sure.
That was one of my other thoughts. Like, I think if you're feeling frustrated and angry, you have to start with yourself.
Why didn't you bring your Tupper, Hannah? Like, you should bring Tupperware. Like, what? Like, there's so many things I can be like, with that.
In that case, the preventing the food waste, I think, it outweighs the reusable container.
Okay, interesting. It's like
that's been my approach. Answers. You have like no, that's the difficult part of it all. But
right.
But obviously we do need to do better. So that's like a way to simplify it. But what that looks like will be different.
That's a good place to end for now. Perhaps.
I think so. Oh, and one of the this probably need a follow-up episode. And I'll link everything in the show notes. But something that I found like kind of uplifting or a bit more hopeful in that article, in that Bloomberg article, was that this subheading, the inequality shift means policy should shift. Over the last 2 decades, policy researchers have left a substantial library of strategies, options, and tactics to put national greenhouse gas pollution on a glide path to zero. The same is not true for wealthy individuals. That started to change. A small group of researchers published a paper in Nature Energy in September that put forward 5 ways in which the global rich can leverage change much larger than themselves. And I'll just briefly list the roles because we're running out of time. Consumer, investor, role model, citizen, and organizational participant. So in this episode, we've talked a lot about the role of a consumer and a bit of like role model because like what the changes you make, they do have a ripple effect on the people around you and the people around them. And yeah, we did that episode on Extinction Rebellion. That's the citizen role. Which, we didn't even talk about there. Like they've shifted from their disruptive action to more community. I'll link that for your new listener to read more.
Yeah, definitely check out the show notes this episode. There's a lot of good stuff on there.
Lots of good links in this one. I like that it broke down those roles, and then in that article, it like shows the connections between like the resources and then like the like desired effect of like reducing like the area it reduces emissions, like travel, housing, et cetera, et cetera. So go check that out. But yeah, we've talked mostly about like being a consumer in this one. So
yeah, I think I think there's definitely a good follow-up in we still haven't done a really good like individual versus corporate.
Yeah, I was just going to bring up the part you said about and how we talk about companies as if they're not made up of individuals.
Yeah, so that's a good one. We always like kind of allude to it, but I don't think we've done a full episode.
I think there's more to be said about that because we think about companies as like, oh, that's one thing, it's one bad thing, but it's made up of the big ones, the ones who are the more guilty emitters, the higher emitters are made up of thousands of people.
Yeah,
and one of the roles being a participant in an organization.
Yeah.
Anyway, so lots more to chat about, but I think start with take the 4 tendencies quiz, Gretchen Rubin, figure out what would be a better way for you to. It's more about like habit building, but I think it would work for like how you can like bring a bit more shame to drive a bit more action in your own personal life, and then I think just being more transparent about being imperfect but wanting to do better and figuring out what that looks like
but I want to be perfect.
You can't, Hannah. Sorry. Neither can I. Neither can Rias. None of us are perfect.
I mean, Rias is pretty close, though.
Oh, yeah, he is pretty close. All right.
This is a cat, not a boyfriend.
Yeah. And on that note, give a shitters. Check out the show notes, theteonsustainableliving.com/episode 24. Yeah, 24.
All right.
And
bye.
Yeah. See you in the next one.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Tea on Sustainable Living podcast.
Now, go share it with a friend,
a coworker,
a partner,
a family member,
or whoever.
A pet, your cat,
someone on the street, whoever you think could use a little more support on their sustainability journey. Share it.
You can send them over to our website, theteonsustainableliving.com. And while you're there, check out the show notes for more info on today's topic.
All right, give a shitters. See you later. Get it? See you later, as in see you later? So funny.
Brandy.